Someone came to that island knowing my name. And to this day, I still don't know how. This happened last year when I was 22. I was exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix, burnt out from work, mentally checked out. Every day felt like it was happening to someone else. I won't go into my past, but I wasn't proud of every chapter, and at that point in my life, I was doing everything I could to put distance between who I was and who I used to be. What I wanted was simple. I wanted to disappear for a few days. I must have been venting out loud because a coworker overheard me and told me about a small island off the coast of Maine. The way he described it made it sound aggressively boring. No nightlife? Barely any tourists after sunset. Most people took the ferry over in the morning and left before dark. He said if you stayed overnight, it felt like the whole island shut down. Like you had it to yourself. That was exactly what I was looking for. I found a rental listing for a tiny standalone cottage right on the shoreline. It was strangely cheap and available immediately. That should have raised some red flags. It didn't. I booked it without thinking twice. The cottage was barely more than a single room. A bed, a kitchenette that looked like it had never been used, a bathroom so small you could barely turn around in it. Thick brush pressed up against three sides of the building, close enough that it scraped the walls when the wind picked up. The front faced the ocean, with a single window covered by a thin, semi-transparent curtain that didn't block much of anything. The walls were paper thin. I could hear the wind moving through the brush like it was right next to my head. The door had a deadbolt and a chain lock. Both looked new. That felt strange for a place so isolated, but I didn't think about it too much. I took a late afternoon ferry over and spent the early evening walking around the island. It felt surreal watching the place empty out. One by one, the day visitors boarded ferries back to the mainland. By the time the sun went down, there were almost no people left. No streetlights. No traffic noise. Just the ocean. It was peaceful. Almost too peaceful. I grabbed dinner at a small pub near the ferry dock. The bartender was friendly enough, but when I told her where I was staying, her expression changed. Just for a second. Enough that I noticed. On my walk back, I passed a small dock tucked into a rocky cove maybe 100 yards from the cottage. There was a single blue motorboat tied there. It stood out because every other boat I'd seen on the island belonged to lobster fishermen, big industrial boats. This one was small, personal. I made a mental note of it and kept walking. I got back to the cottage around 10:30, locked the deadbolt and the chain, and settled in for the night. That's when I realized my phone wasn't charging. I tried every outlet in the cottage. Nothing worked. Either the charger was broken or the wiring was bad. My battery was already low, and I knew it wouldn't last long. I had a physical ferry ticket, so I wasn't stranded, but the idea of a dead phone still bothered me. Eventually, I decided to just sleep. I was exhausted, and I fell asleep quickly. I woke up in the middle of the night for no clear reason. And then, I heard it. Footsteps on gravel. They were close, right outside the cottage, slow, deliberate. There was a long pause between each step, like whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. It didn't sound like an animal. I shifted slightly in bed. The footsteps stopped immediately. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It stretched on long enough that I started convincing myself I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it really was an animal. Maybe I had woken myself up. Then, the footsteps came back. This time, they weren't passing by. They were approaching. They stopped directly in front of the door. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. I didn't move. I barely breathed. A flashlight flicked on. Light pushed through the thin curtain. Then it clicked off. The door handle moved. I squeezed my eyes shut and silently begged the locks to hold. They did. For a moment, I thought that was enough. I was wrong. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then came several violent bangs against the door. The sound filled the tiny cottage, and I flinched with every impact. That's when fear turned into instinct. Without thinking, I jumped out of bed and crouched down behind the door, bracing myself for it to break open. Instead, everything went quiet. I stayed there, frozen for several seconds. Then, a voice spoke from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there, Leo." My blood went cold. It was a man's voice, one I didn't recognize. But he knew my name. Footsteps moved away from the door and along the side of the cottage. I tracked the sound as it passed the bathroom wall and continued around. He wasn't trying to get in anymore. He was letting me know he could wait. I don't know how long it lasted. 20 minutes? Maybe an hour. Whoever it was circled the cottage slowly and patiently. Eventually, the footsteps faded. Then, from the direction of the dock, I heard an engine start. A small outboard motor. I listened as it pulled away from shore and disappeared into the darkness. I didn't sleep after that. At first light, I left the cottage. The gravel told the whole story. Heavy boot prints circled the building multiple times. They led in a straight line toward the dock and ended right at the water. I returned the key, boarded the ferry, and went home. But here's what still haunts me. Whoever that was didn't wander onto the island. They came by boat, specifically to that cottage, on that exact night. And they knew my name. I still work the same job. I still live in the same place. And I have no reason to believe it's over.